Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Iowa State Cyclones Live here on the Voice of College Football Network. I'm your host, Levi Stevenson, back for another week of football and just general Iowa State discussion. Iowa State is still in the middle of spring practice, or kind of in the early part of that, I should say. But got a little bit to talk about there, and I really want to talk about just kind of some projection type stuff there. But we were going to talk about Dom Orange this week and his combine stuff, but he ended up not really doing much at the combine. He did his interviews, but otherwise is saving his testing times for a pro day. So we won't have a lot to talk about there as far as his day goes. But so we're going to talk a little bit about football, specifically the things that I want to hear as far as like rumors coming out of spring practice, like things that I want to hear. But then we're also going to talk a little bit of basketball too, I think, if we've got a little bit of time, depending on what the chat brings up and all that stuff too. So as usual, appreciate everybody that brings in comments and chat and questions and all that stuff. And happy to answer questions throughout the entire stream. Whatever you guys have for me. So first up, let's talk a little bit about the things that I want to hear coming out of spring practice. So these are just like, whether it's little nuggets or just, whether news or nuggets or whatever, just the rumors that I want to hear, just to make me feel like the Jimmy Rogers era is off to a good start. And to feel like this thing is still pointed in the right direction, in that, because every spring, I think we hear different rumors come out, or we hear different little things like, oh, this guy is performing well, this group's doing well, whatever it is. And then, sometimes it's real, sometimes it's not. Sometimes it's just like hyping a dude up just to hype him up type of thing. There's now it was a fall practice thing and not a spring practice thing, but there's the infamous like Easton Dean might be the best tight end we've ever had come through here bit. And then that turned out to be extremely not true. But we also heard like fall practice again. But when Breece Hall first got started here, we had heard that like Breece Hall was having like a ridiculous camp and that he might be the best running back to go through Iowa State. And that actually turned out to be basically true. So if actually wants to talk about gymnastics, which actually we could talk a little bit about gymnastics. I had set this video up before the gymnastics stuff kind of started blowing up a little bit. It was after the original announcement that the program was getting shut down, but it was before all the athletes started posting their stuff on Twitter and turning this into a little bit of a situation. I don't know if it, exactly what magnitude the situation is, but we can talk a little gymnastics as well. But we'll talk a little about football to start off with. So just a few things that I kind of want to hear, just because this is a Voice of College Football show. So I feel like we should at least talk a little bit of football. The first main thing that I want to hear out of practice is I want to hear that Jalen Raynor has started to set himself apart from the pack in terms of being the starter and being the senior leader. We've already heard a little bit about that, about him stepping in and, learning guys' names and just being a generally a good teammate and stuff like that. We've heard a lot of that already, but I want to hear that like on the field, he has started to set himself apart. Like no offense to Connor Moberly whatsoever, but just like, I want to hear that Jalen Raynor has taken a firm hold of the starting quarterback position, in that, they wouldn't have brought him in if he wasn't like kind of sort of penciled in at least, or, at bare minimum had an upper hand in a QB battle. But I want the QB battle to be completely settled by the end of the spring. When you have a team like this that's full of a lot of new players, young players, to me, the last thing that you want to have going into your season when you have such a new team and new coaching staff and all this is that you don't want to have any sort of doubts at the QB position. And I think, generally speaking, I think pretty much everybody believes in Jalen Raynor's ability. He's obviously super athletic. He's a veteran guy that's played a lot of football, had a lot of success, played for some good Arkansas State teams, was coached by Butch Jones, who is a well-respected coach. I don't think anybody really questions his ability. It's more just can he step his game up to match a higher level of competition. He's just got Jalen Raynor has just got the one left, so he's here for just this year. So that's why I think you're looking at he's almost certainly going to be the starter, but I want that to be settled this spring. I want there to be a clear delineation between him as the starter, Mobley as the backup, and then whoever at the third spot, Hudson Curland or whoever at the third spot. If you can have that solidified, you can have the most important position on your team solidified going into fall camp, going into the season. That gives you a place to build everything else around. If you know what your quarterback situation is going to be, you can build your offense around that. You can build your scheme. And I think you just you want to have that foundation to build everything else from. So I want to hear Jalen Raynor has been essentially, written in stone as the starter for this coming season. The next thing I want to hear, we're kind of moving through here though, is I want to hear about an offensive line group that is starting to gel a little bit. Now it's hard to do that without scrimmages and stuff like that. And that's you're going to hear more of that in fall practice, but I want to hear about guys like Masai King that they are living up to, that they're thus far, as advertised. You could talk about the running backs, I think, and there's like some worthwhile discussion to be had there, as far as Aiden Flora or Petaway. There's Bryson Williams. There's interesting discussion to be had about the running backs, but I think just based on the scheme, based on the quarterback, and based on how I think they're going to do this, I don't know if it necessarily matters a ton who the individual players are at running back, as long as they, if they're good enough to start, they're probably good enough to be successful in this scheme if everything else is going well. So I'm not as worried about the individuals to hear about out of the running back room. Like, I don't really care if it's Petaway or if it's Aiden Flora or if it's Bryson. I'm not really too worried about that either way. And obviously, River Peppers is going to be out for the next, he'll be out into October, I would imagine, because of his Achilles injury. Like my guess is he'll probably take another red shirt. He'll either have his red shirt or medical red shirt last season, and he'll grab a red shirt or medical red shirt this season as well, I would imagine. Or he'll come back late enough that he can only play in 4 regular season games or something like that. So I would imagine River Peppers will return in 2027 as a redshirt freshman, a third-year redshirt freshman. But the offensive line, I'd like to hear that they're starting to have some guys float to the top, Masai King and there's a few other guys, maybe Barrett or something like that. A couple other guys. I want to hear about a few guys that are starting to rise to the top a little bit, because I think if you can find your foundational pieces, Taylor would be another one. I think I'd like to hear him step up. Maybe Gavin Proudfoot. And I'm just saying about this PE dishing. All the Olympic sports for Iowa State are just going insane right now. I want to hear that. I want to hear that group. Next thing I want to hear is some more about the wide receiver position. So the wide receiver position specifically, it'd be nice to hear about guys like Amari Hayes and stuff like that. What I'm actually more interested, the one I'm almost most interested in, because I think the other guys will be good. I want to hear, there's a couple different guys. But I want to hear about the development of no, you're good. Sorry. Yeah. You kind of blew my train of thought there. But I wanted to hear about the receiver whose name has completely escaped me. Coming back from last year. God damn it. I just completely left my brain. Fuck. What's his name? The hell am I thinking of? Dominic Overby. There we go. I want to hear about Dominic Overby, because last year, obviously, he started hot, caught that touchdown pass in the Kansas State game. And he's a big time athlete. He's a big time athlete that last year we thought he would be able to step up and become kind of that maybe the X receiver for Iowa State. And his hands didn't catch up to his athleticism. He just never put it together consistently. And I think it's at 6'5", and with his athleticism, the foundation is clearly there. The blueprint is clearly there for a high end number one receiver right there. I want to see if this offseason he'll have a new receivers coach and have a new system and all this, of a new quarterback. And maybe that's the refresh that Dominic Overby needed to be able to develop and to hit that next step in his growth, where he can be a reliable pass catching target. I mean, we knew coming out of high school that he was going to be fairly raw, because he was basically coming out of high school just an athlete, essentially. Very much in the same neighborhood as like Hakeem Butler was, where he's a really good athlete, just raw, not super refined necessarily as a route runner or as a contested catcher. Well, maybe contested catcher isn't the right word, because Hakeem Butler was very good at that. But as far as like an every down pass catcher, and having reliable hands, not dropping passes, things like that. But obviously Hakeem developed into a good deep route runner and a good contested catch guy. Even if he never really firmed up his game, like in the underneath game, and becoming like a really, really consistent, no drops guy, but obviously developed into a very good player. I think Dominic Overby has the athleticism to do something similar. He's not quite built quite as thick as Hakeem Butler is, so he's not going to be able to just completely out physical guys the way Hakeem could, but he can absolutely be that kind of a deep threat for Iowa State, as long as he can put the hands together. So this is actually a great point here. If Overby is a catch machine this year, there'll be some statements made about our previous wide receiver coach, Noah Paul, and that you're talking about Noah Pauley, who actually was at Penn State for like a month, and then he went to the NFL, I want to say, Noah Pauley, or to another program, I can't remember now, but Noah Pauley is now not even at Penn State, he went to the Packers. He's the wide receiver coach for the Packers because he linked up with Christian Watson there, who he coached at North Dakota State. It was either on this channel or on the Nightcap last year. There was multiple times that I was at least skeptical, I would say, of Noah Pauley, because his claim to fame was Christian Watson, who came out as a big time athlete that was unpolished and had some drop issues. That was Noah Pauley's guy. That was his claim to fame. That's what got him the job at Iowa State, basically, is Christian Watson. At Iowa State, they had a couple guys develop. Obviously, Jaden Higgins, Jalen Knoll, very good receivers. Jalen got much better after having some early drops. Was that just natural progression, or was that Noah Pauley that fixed that? I'm not sure. And I believe that Jaden Higgins was just good to begin with. I don't think Noah Pauley was instrumental in Jaden Higgins being good. I think that's just kind of like how Jaden Higgins is. I think he's just a good receiver. I don't think Noah Pauley changed his trajectory a lot. And Jaden if you ask Jaden in person, he'd probably tell you that Noah Pauley was a huge, instrumental thing, but that's just kind of what guys do. We're going to find out though, because this year the drops were out of control. And if it's one guy, you can say, okay, this guy has lost confidence. He's lost concentration, whatever it is. You can write it off as just like it's one or two guys. It was the whole wide receiver room last year. Everyone except Eli Green, which is interesting that he just didn't play very much, but and especially because he was a North Dakota State guy. So it was very, very odd that Eli Green, who was the only consistent pass catcher on the entire team, was the one that just didn't play very much. But either way, when it's an entire position group that is just not able to do the primary function of their job, I think you have to look at the position coach and how good of a job they were doing. If your wide receivers can't consistently catch the football, then the wide receiver coach is not doing his job, because it is his job to make sure that his wide receivers can catch the football. Now, whether that's he's doing everything he can to teach them and they're just not picking it up, and then that means it's kind of almost a recruiting issue and you're not recruiting coachable players, or you have good enough players that can make that adjustment, which if you're a Division I receiver, you are good enough to be a good pass catcher, which to me points to the fact that Noah Pauly just wasn't doing a very good job last season. And that could be for a number of factors, but that's just kind of what it is. You have a new wide receivers coach now that I think will get, you'll give Dominic Overby a fresh look at his development. He can change things because he's got just a new set of eyes on his game that can watch and say, hey, this kid is really good. He can develop into a really nice player, and they can maybe get through to him in a way that Noah Pauly and the previous staff just couldn't do it. So I'm excited to hear about Dominic Overby. I want to hear if we can see that growth being made. Like I said, I think Omari Hayes, Cody Jackson, I think Carson Robbins, these guys, I feel like they're gonna be good. Carson Robbins is a random name to throw in there because he hasn't played much, but especially Omari Hayes, Cody Jackson, Evan Boyd, Carter Pabst, these guys that we expect to be heavy snap count guys. I expect them to be in the rotation. I'm not super worried about that. I'm not necessarily. I wouldn't say I'm worried about Dominic Overby so much as I'm very curious about what his growth, because his ceiling is incredibly high. His ceiling is an NFL receiver, but he's got to get it put together. He's got all the athleticism in the world. He's just got to get it put together and get to be a little bit better route runner. So he's not just a go ball guy, and he needs to be a consistent pass catcher in the short and intermediate stuff too.